set which need to be addressed during this. So with this, we can say that most of the structures constructed in those not so properly constructed built environment, uh, buildings are I don't know, the experts are going to talk about that as well. So how buildings are going to perform in a big earthquake like we had in 1720. So this is the thing. Uh, there are issues related to building bylaws implementation. Uh, then issues are like construction practices which we are following. Then population density is definitely increasing. As far as construction practices are concerned, not only in Delhi, in our urban areas, most of the time we are using brick houses or brick walled houses. Though construction practices are changing to frame structures or RCC related thing, but the question is how many of our masons or those contractors, so-called ठेकेदार्स, are aware about earthquake safe construction practices in those domain areas. Then issues related to land use planning and all those things. Like I don't know how many of us are aware and taking care of land use planning in context vis-a-vis to microzonation things, and how many urban areas have already been microzoned for the seismic risk mitigation. This is the thing. Then Delhi's housing is as poor as anywhere, any big city is. Like if we say housing typology in Delhi, we can very easily divide urban villages, rural villages which has been converted in urban villages which has come under the municipal boundaries of the city. Then we have a large chunk of unauthorized colonies. This is not on in Delhi. Almost every city is having that thing. Unauthorized colonies which have already been regularized. I don't know what is the solution for those type of things. So we have to talk something about that as well. In Delhi, we have a series of regularization of those unauthorized colonies. We are in the process of regularizing another bunch of almost 700 unauthorized colonies. So this is a big challenge for earthquake mitigation experts. Then slums and squatters. Then resettlement colonies which have been those slums have been resettled somewhere. This is another thing. Then every city has evolved from that core organic development of old city parks. Like Delhi is having a big old city park. Like Edison was mentioning about Bhuj was having old city park. Every big city is having that. So we have very big urban old city parks in almost all urban areas. As far Delhi is concerned, uh, you can say so-called New Delhi, which is having the region's Bangla zone, which is having brick masonry and again, fingers crossed the performance of those. Though a lot of work has already been taken up for retrofitting of those things, but performance is again a big question mark. Then markets like Connaught Place in Delhi, DDA housing, so-called authorized construction or properly construction. Uh, our habitants of those houses have already done a lot of alterations, and due to that vulnerability, I don't know. We have to discuss about that as well. How the alterations and those construction practices, that how vulnerable are those houses which has been provided by DDA, and knowledge of safety and all those things. This is in brief about the urban related things. As far earthquakes are concerned, or earthquake related things, there are 38 cities which are falling under zone 3, 4, and 5. Out of that, two cities, Srinagar, 38 cities with the 5 5 million plus population are there. Out of that, two cities, Guwahati and Srinagar, 5 million plus population cities are in zone 5. Then uh, 8 cities, including Delhi, are in zone 4. So this is another challenge. And another aspect of earthquake risk mitigation is that all those urban centers are not having earthquake problem, they are having problems related to other hazards as well, like Srinagar, like Guwahati, like Delhi, like Patna. So all of them are having multiplicity of disasters or hazards prevailing there. So this is not only one dimensional challenge, it's several dimensions. Then other cities are falling. Almost 28 cities are in zone 3. So then, what are the things which we are planning to do, or what we are expecting out of this webinar is that how to protect the developmental gains which we have already achieved in our urban areas. A lot of investment has already been made. Like in Delhi, we have metro. We have a lot of infrastructure facilities. So is in Bombay, so is in Kolkata, so is in other urban centers. So how to protect our developmental gains through those mitigation measures. Then how to mainstream DRR into development so that we can absorb those things and develop that resilience, and ultimately to protect all those things, the community preparedness form the key for all of us. So in light of this, there are several earthquakes which has already impacted at national level. Uh, uh, we had a big earthquake 1935 Quetta earthquake, pre-independence, pre-partition. So that was, I think, the first one. The experts may correct me, which impacted the big urban centers. And after that, in recent past, we had Bhuj earthquake 2001, which had a big bearing on urban centers, including Ahmedabad, not only those small towns of Bhuj, Anjar, Gandhidham, and Bajau, but big cities like Ahmedabad was also impacted. Then we had this Jabalpur earthquake in 1997. So these are the few earthquakes which had. And in this background, we are going to discuss about this 1720 earthquake which happened uh, this month in July. Magnitude was 6.5, and literature, lot of information is there, and we have a special speaker, a special session on that by Mr. Saurabh Shradhankar, who is going to talk about the impact of that earthquake in Delhi at that time and how we can interpret this. So this is in brief about that. Now I request Mr. Saurabh to take over. And before he takes over, I let me take this opportunity to introduce Saurabh Shridhankar, who is assistant professor at IIT Roorkee, Department of Earthquake Engineering. He has done his PhD from IIT Bombay, I think with Professor Ravi Sinha sir. So he's definitely the BTech in civil engineering and MTech from IIT Roorkee. His specialization is seismic damage assessment, structural liability and risk assessment, performance evaluation of structures. And besides that, another area of his expertise is post-earthquake safety assessment, repair, rehabilitation, and retrofitting of structures, vibration control, and non-linear analysis of structures. So, with this brief introduction, I request Saurabh to take over and give a brief about uh, his discussion on performance that 6.5 Delhi earthquake of July 1720, description of damage patterns. So, Saurabh, now you can take over.
Sure. Thank you, Amir, for the introduction. So I'll share my. So, okay, so topic of the presentation is the description of damage pattern which has happened during 1720 Delhi earthquake. So Delhi, being situated in the northern part of India, has frequently felt many earthquakes. Many earthquakes are reported in ancient literature. The first major earthquake that Delhi has felt in the record is in 16th century, which was the Kabul earthquake. However, the documentary evidence of first major destruction, which was recorded in the literature, was caused by earthquake of July 1720. So, in order to understand the damage that has been caused by this earthquake, the relative strength of earthquake is normally depends on the size of area over which the shaking is noticed. So to understand that, just quickly go through the Delhi as a city at that time. So the area which was mainly affected during the event of 1720 was the Old Delhi. So the Old Delhi at that time comprises the area called Shahjahanabad, which was the wall city. There was a fortress wall around the entire city. The city was located on the banks of Yamuna, and the entire city was settled on the sedimentary deposits of the Yamuna river. So the city has two main features: the Red Fort, which is located near the Yamuna bank, which was located near the Yamuna bank, and there was a Jama Masjid, which is located next to the Red Fort. In addition to that, there were quite a few good mansions which were built across the city, which were mainly located on the western as well as the south part of the city. So in addition to that, the city has a complete system of all-season canal, which was led from the various part of the city towards the Yamuna river. So talking about the July 1720 earthquake, in the literature by the Kafi Khan, it was said that the event was occurred in the month of Ramzan, and during the time when the pre-prayer address was in process. So that was the main event, which was eventually happened during the daytime. And then after that, there were 9 to 10 aftershock, which were felt during the day and the following nights. So in addition to that, there were several aftershocks which were lasted for nearly 40 days, and every day nearly 4 to 5 aftershocks were felt in the region. The frequency of aftershocks was reduced afterwards, but occasional shaking was experienced for next 4 to 5 months. Now, in order to understand the relative strength of the earthquake, we need to transform the damage description which are given in the many literature as well as in the research paper into the engineering measures to quantify the size of earthquake. And the one way to quantify the size of earthquake from such description is the intensity measure. So the intensity measures generally used to understand the severity of the ground motion, and it generally based on the effects those were actually felt at the given area or at the in the area. So intensity scale is generally depend on the four factors. It basically considers the effect of earthquake or the ground shaking on the living things. So it basically depends on the reaction to the reaction of people as well as of the animal. Then it also depends on the effect on the ordinary objects, or nowadays what we say is the non-structural elements or the building components in a building. Then the important parameter that defines the intensity of an earthquake is the effect on the buildings. Now, it essentially depends on the damage that has happened to a building. And the fourth parameter, which is considered in defining the intensity, is the effect on the natural environment. So this leads to the formation of cracks on roads as well as the formation of wave patterns on a soft soil. So to understand the effect or to quantify the intensity of 1720 event in Old Delhi area, we will classify the damage description given in the literature on these four factors. So first of all, the effect on humans, as it's been said in the literature that it was the month of Ramzan and many were gathered in the mosque for the prayer. So people gathered were afraid of noise which was heard from the roof as well as from the ground. In addition to that, there was shaking of wall and cracks on roofs were evident. So there was a severe panic among the people, and in addition to that, it was mentioned in the literature that nearly 1,000 people were perished in the old city of Delhi at that time. In addition to that, when we look out the effect of that earthquake on the building content as well as the object, so there was a market set up on the western side of the old city, and the market was completely destroyed, and that's mainly because the standalone objects couldn't stand the ground shaking, and they completely toppled down. So there was huge destruction in the market. It is essential to understand that the city was built on the sedimentary deposits of the floodplains of Yamuna, and these sedimentary deposits or the soft soil, we call it in the engineering terms, they amplify the response of the ground shaking, and because of that, at some location there was wave patterns also observed on the soft soil. As mentioned earlier, there were several canals which were running from the western part of the city towards the Yamuna river, and because of the saturated nature of the soil, the liquefaction was also observed at the several locations. Now, the important parameter to define the intensity is effect of earthquake on the buildings. Since the most of the construction at that time was mud houses, adobe mud houses with timber roof, all those mud houses had a wall which was completely unsupported. That felt the severe shaking, and several buildings were destroyed. Additionally, all those mud houses were closely packed in the small area, so there could be the possibility of pounding in the region, and that could have enhanced the damage in the region. In addition to that, there are several monumental structures were there in the city. So it is essential to understand the effect of ground shaking, not just to the ordinary building, but also it is essential to understand their effect on the monumental structure, because the intensity is the relative parameter which consider the effect of ground shaking on the entire part of the on the entire area. So few structures such as the battlement of the Fatehpur Mosque, it got damaged, it fall down and it killed nearly 10 to 12% was mentioned in the literature. So as I said, in order to understand the intensity of earthquake, it is essential to understand not only the houses which were get damaged, but also the portion which was not damaged. So there was no damage to the main structure of the Fatehpur Mosque. In addition to that, there was no damage or no destruction reported in the Red Fort area as well as the Jama Masjid. The main reason for non-damage of these two structures could be both these structures are on the small hilly area, and the Red Fort it didn't suffer any damage, mainly because of superior quality of design and the construction. In addition to that, we also need to look into the effect of these earthquakes on the infrastructure. So the Market Road, which was located on the west side of city, which goes from west side of the city to the south end of the city, was completely destroyed, and also the buildings in the market were completely destructed. So there was a major destruction in the market area of the city. So to quantify the intensity of an earthquake in engineering terms, the damage description that we have seen need to transform into a statistical element. So the commonly used statistical framework to understand this intensity are to classify the damage into few, many, and most parameter. So if you look out the damage description and convert them into these three parameters, we can say that the people reaction as well as the destruction to the common houses as well as to the building content comes under the most category. However, the most of the monuments structure, which was the Red Fort, Jama Masjid, and the several mansions which were built in the adobe stone masonry, didn't got damaged. There were many earthen roads which suffered severe damage. In addition to that, at few locations, we seen that the parapets of well-constructed structure experienced severe damage, and few moderately well-constructed house like a mansion experienced a minor damage. In addition to that, the geotechnical parameter, which is the liquefaction, was observed at some location. Also, there were wave patterns were seen on the soft ground. So with this description, there are many intensity scales available, but the widely followed is the MMI intensity scale, which is the modified Mercalli intensity scale. this intensity scale has undergone several revisions. There are two scales which are generally followed. One is from 1931 and other is from 1956. So this scale over here is the one which is available, which is defined in 1956. So in this scale, the intensity of an earthquake is defined over the 10 between 1 to 10. The scale, the intensities between 1 to 7 are defined on the basis of people's reaction, while the intensities between 8 to 10 where depends on the people's reaction as well as the damage which has happened to building as well as to the infrastructure. So in nutshell, the earthquake of 1720 with this classification that we have done can be classified as the intensity 9 event, which represent the violent shaking in the old Delhi area. Now some studies are also available which provides the damage classification or the classification of earthquake on the basis of monetary losses as well as the casualties which has happened. So Gansey and Nelson has provided such kind of study. They have quantified and classified all the earthquakes from 2000 BC to the 1979, and they are classified based on the monetary losses. So they have converted the damage description into the corresponding monetary losses, considering the socio-economical factor at that time. So they have proposed this 5-point scale, which classifies the damage from insignificant to extreme classes and corresponding monetary losses. They have also used the inflation table to adjust the earthquake losses in terms of US dollar corresponding to 1979. So for the event which were occurred before 1790, the US dollar 3 are equivalent to US dollar 100 in 1979. So with this definition, what they have come up with is the severity of earthquake in 1720 events is severe. The deaths in the earthquake that has happened were many, and the losses with reference to 1979 US dollars was of moderate order, and the losses order would be between 1 to 5 million US dollars. So in nutshell, we can say that the 1720 events in the old Delhi was severe, and it has led to many monetary losses as well as the life losses in the relevant times. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saurabh, for very informative and wonderful presentation. So we will request you to be here, and let's see if some queries are coming or not. So, friends, with this background, I think we have discussed this a little bit about 1729. So now I request ED NIDM Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal sir to give his keynote address. And before I request Bindal sir to take over, let me take this opportunity also to introduce him. Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal sahab is the Executive Director of the Institute, National Institute of Disaster Management. He is highly distinguished and eminent professional with army background. He is having an experience of almost 35 years. Bindal sahab was commissioned into the Corps of Army Air Defense in December 1985. He is an alumnus of the National Defense Academy. He has graduated. He is the graduate of the Defense Services Staff College and has attended the prestigious Higher Command course at the Army War College. Bindal Sahab holds a master's degree in Defense and Strategic Studies as well as Master of Philosophy in Defense and Management Studies. Bindal Sahab is having a wide experience dealing with the disasters and with a special reference to earthquakes, as he was mentioning in the beginning when we were not formally organizing this. He handled that Bhuj earthquake. He was posted at Bhuj at that time. So he's having some first-hand experience of how to manage big earthquakes. And he's not only served in Bhuj area at the time of earthquake, he served in Arunachal Pradesh and had experienced many earthquakes and has contributed a lot in that area as well. So In brief, in addition to all these experiences, Bindal Saab has served the United Nations as well. He was the director of Center for United Nations Peacekeeping in New Delhi. In addition to that, he served the United Nations mission in Mozambique. And Bindal Saab is, as mentioned earlier, is highly distinguished, eminent expert in disaster management and with a wide experience. So, with this brief introduction, I request ED and IDM Major General Bindal Saab to take over and do his keynote address.
Thank you, Dr. Amir Ali Khan. And if I must congratulate Professor Saurabh for digging out this history of 1720, because we felt that since we are commemorating 300th anniversary of that earthquake, we should have a knowledge of what happened that time, because we always talk about traditional wisdom in all our present doings. So it's important. So thank you, Professor Saurabh, for giving a very detailed description from the limited literature of 300 years ago, but it was enlightening. I welcome all the participants, and especially Shri Kamal Kishore ji, who's member NDMA, who's been always uh, guiding NIDM in all its endeavors and supporting us with his presence, which gives a great value to our programs and also is a very big motivation factor. I'll talk about this subject in very brief because I've got such eminent speakers lined up. I will urban earthquake has the capacity to cause maximum devastation, both in terms of men, material, and infrastructure, because of the density of the population in an urban center, because of the density of the infrastructure in the urban center, and everything is so closely related. So any effect on any one part immediately affects the other geographical area also. So it is a need, there is a need to worry about it. There's a need to worry about it. And last few months, we have seen, especially in Delhi, large number of minor tremors of the earthquakes. What effect this particular cumulative effect of this constant shaking on the stability of the buildings, of the stability of the soil erosion, or stability of the urban cities which are located on slopes, that has escaped the scientific community investigation, because till today we have not been able to come out with a model, scientific model, where we can start measuring this, how a structure is getting weakened by day to day or by frequent minor shakes, which are shaking that building to some extent, shaking its core. And is it as safe as it was before it, or what is the damage? So that is a major area where we need to do a lot of scientific study in our near future. Old towns are highly vulnerable. Old towns are vulnerable because they have been masonry structure, most of it. Their rooms have been like in that structure after structure is added as and when the families increase, the size increases, or the person starts getting some finances and he adds one more room, then he adds one more room. So there is no structural strength to that building. The structural strength to those buildings is by leaning on each other and drawing collective structural strength. In Bhuj, we have seen, and Bachau, the whole city got flattened because it was total masonry. So the moment the masonry with mud, the stones were joined together with mud. So the moment the shaking happened, everything fell apart. Old city of Bhuj, the buildings fell apart because of the structure. New city also, large number of RCC structures fell apart because they must not have been built in the proper condition. But there is a need to carry out this rapid assessment. That's why I was asking this question to Dr. Emil Sharma, Professor Emil Sharma that time. Are you, no, I think I asked it to Dr. Utpal, I'm forgetting. Are you authorized to give the risk assessment of like the validity of a structure? So what came out that only municipality or the government organization who have a structural engineer or may not have a structural engineer, it could be a civil engineering doing the job of the structural engineer. because we are aware that structural engineers are very less in number in the whole world, not only in India. He is the one who certifies without any scientific background, scientific backup, I'll say, not background, scientific backup with the help of modern tools and technologies. So that there is a need to carry out rapid assessment in all urban cities to identify vulnerable structures existing today and carry out their retrofitting or carry out other mitigation measures to save life. And of course, the new structures has to be ensured that it is earthquake proof. One in major cause or major area of research is earthquake forecasting. Till today, we do not have a forecasting mechanism. We have not been able to find out world over as to how to forecast an earthquake. Uh, 17 seconds was the time given in Mexico in the last earthquake. That was supposed to be, it was one of the best timings in the world. Otherwise, here we are talking about 3 to 5 seconds, 6 seconds. Now, in that many seconds, a person, for him to orient himself to earthquake mode, earthquake saving mode, it requires military type of training, where the same thing is taught to him day and night, that he doesn't have to think about it. The moment things happen here, it is automatic in his system. It is not possible with the community. So hence the massive effort requires to go into earthquake forecasting capability. We have seen in Bhuj as well as in Arunachal, where I faced about 6 earthquakes over my tenure in high altitude, uh, that the earthquakes follow up. It is they are like the arteries, the veins and capillaries of our body. You will find when an earthquake line, if it is plotted properly, it will touch one part of the building, but in that line that it is crossing, it will touch anything which is there on that line, whether big or small. And a weak structure right next to that fault line will go undamaged. I've seen it in Bhuj, I've seen it in Arunachal Pradesh, I have seen it in Ladakh also. Same thing happening. So there may be a cause to again scientific research of identifying such fault lines, fissures, even the minor ones. Even the most minor one causes major damage. It all depends upon the depth of the earthquake epicenter. So that minor ones also in Bhuj, not in Bhuj, sorry, in Rupa in Arunachal Pradesh, which is a city just before Tawang, at a height of about 6,000 feet. There, we were in a three-story building, hostel type of accommodation. I was staying there, and next to us was a type 7 quarter of a brigadier. His whole house was totally destroyed, and their boundary wall was touching our boundary wall. Whereas in our building, there was just minor cracks. But in his house, when it was destroyed, and you could see that line stretching across good about half a kilometer, where all houses in that line were destroyed. Same thing happened in Bhuj. If you go to the army camp even today, you will find the remnants of how a fault line has only affected buildings on that fault line. So that correlation of that fault line to the structural vulnerability needs to be ascertained. So when we carry out an assessment, before that these lines should be identified. I don't know how it will be done. The professors would be in a position to think about it. And anything and everything falling on those fault lines should be termed as vulnerable, and priority action should be taken on that. The second issue I'll talk about response is lack of heavy equipment. There was a building which fell down, 7-story building. It came down like bread slices. Finally, 7 floors could be seen as slices of bread sandwich. Uh, but we could not do anything, even when we could hear the shrieks of people from inside shouting for help, because we didn't have equipment. We require cranes to more than 50-ton capacity. We require heavy earth moving equipment. We require, but that was not there. It finally came from one cement factory next to Nalia after 2 days. But by then, a lot of lives had been lost. So in urban centers, because of RCC construction, there is a requirement of heavy equipment. Heavy means very heavy, not 20, 30 tons, more than 50 tons crane, wherein we have the capacity to lift the complete roof slab of a particular floor and save people inside or move something. Bridges, the whole bridge got disoriented, I would say, because of the crack. Uh, we didn't have any heavy equipment to shift it back to a little bit, which was possible at that point of time. But it was not there because of lack of heavy equipment. So heavy equipment, very heavy equipment, very heavy earth movers is a requirement. It took 1 month to clear the roads of Old Bhuj because the army had heavy equipment, earth moving equipment, but also of limited capability because they were required for the requirement of the army, but not for this particular purpose. So it took 1 month to clear that, which could have been done in 10 days. So this is an area where I think we can do a lot. So I'll finish my introductory remarks or whatever by saying that there's a need to improve the resilience, and so there should be a culture of preparedness, culture of mitigation, culture of quick response, and most importantly, culture of good governance, which will ensure that things fall in place. All these discussions that we have fall in place. With this, I thank Dr. Amir Ali Khan once again for organizing this webinar and look forward to listening to all the speakers. Thank you, and over to you, Dr. Amir Ali Khan.
Thank you, sir, for nice and enlightening opening keynote address. So, you have rightly mentioned that urban areas are definitely posing a big challenge to the administrators, and definitely good governance has to play a big role. And unless we prepare those cultures of preparedness, culture of mitigation, culture of quick response, we are not going to achieve these targets of earthquake risk mitigation or earthquake safe cities. Definitely, cities are posing a big challenge, and cities like Delhi, which have a long history, or cities in Northeast, all capital cities of North Northeast India, or Srinagar or Dehradun. These are definitely a big challenge to all government planners and for the administrators to take care of that. With this, let's start with the. I take this opportunity to invite Shri Kamal Kishore sir, who is the honorable member of NDMA, for a special address on challenges of earthquake risk mitigation in urban areas. And before I request Kamal Kishore sir to take over, let me take this opportunity also to introduce him. Kamal Kishore sir is having a long experience of serving not only internationally, but he has served at local level in India, at national level. Now he's serving, and he's having vast experience of serving at international level. He served UNDP for almost 13 years. He served in UNDP headquarters in Geneva as well as New York. He served in Delhi when he was the West Asia advisor. So Kamal Kishore Saab is having a lot of experience, varied experience uh, dealing with the issues related to disaster management. He has wide experience in post earthquake or post disaster reconstruction programs. He has handled several activities in countries like Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Iran, Myanmar, Pakistan, Philippines, and Sri Lanka when he was the West Asia advisor. So, in addition to that, Kamal Kishore Saab is having long experience of serving Asian Disaster Preparedness Center in Bangkok, where he was the Director of Information and Research and the manager of the Extreme Climate Event Program, and dealing with the countries Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. As I told in the beginning, Kamal Kishore sir has started his professional career uh, after graduating from IIT Roorkee in architecture. So Kamal Kishore sir is an architect from IIT Roorkee with a master's degree from Asian Institute of Technology in Bangkok, and his master's degree was in urban planning, land and housing development. So he's the most appropriate person to take this webinar forward. And one of the important things I want to tell you is that Kamal Kishore sir has done his master's thesis on an assessment of earthquake vulnerability in a low-income settlement in New Delhi. So he's the most appropriate person to talk about the challenges of earthquake, urban earthquake risk mitigation in Indian context. So with this brief introduction, I request you, sir, to take over and for your special address on challenges of earthquake risk mitigation in urban areas. Thank you, sir.
The opportunity and for that very generous introduction. I am delighted to be here with all of you, and I really commend the initiative taken by NIDM to mark the 300th anniversary of 1720 earthquake. It is an important date, and we should use this opportunity to reflect on earthquake risk reduction issues and do whatever we can to protect ourselves as well as our future generations from earthquakes. So on the earthquake risk reduction work, the dialogue in the country is quite advanced. I started working in this area after the 1991 Uttarkashi earthquake. And even before that, at least 30, 40 years before then, we've had several firsts to our credit. One of the first earthquake in Asia. We started working on non-engineered construction, earthquake resistant long time ago. Our codes have tried to keep pace with the latest advancement in the earthquake engineering as well as understanding of what's happening under the earth. So this is a very advanced field in some ways in the country. I would emphasize in the community of practitioners who work on earthquake risk reduction issues are quite cohesive, quite and the national discourse on disaster management as a whole. You don't see similar kind of cohesion on people working on mitigating the risk of disasters emanating from other hazards. So in such a context, Dr. Amir Khan, I don't know how special I can make my special remarks. A lot of special things already have been said. And particularly the remarks that General Bindal made, as well as the presentation on what we know about the 1720 earthquake. So I will not repeat the issues which are well known and well analyzed in terms of the whole need for laws, better adoption of building codes, lack of capacity, and so on. Those things are known, and I'm sure experts present today will discuss those in greater depth. I just want to make five sort of higher points. The first point I want to make is that despite the fact that we've been working on earthquake risk issues for a long time now, for decades, it would be quite appropriate to say that in terms of reducing the overall risk, we haven't really made enough progress. I can say that in patches, the compliance with building codes is much greater. We have more nuanced, advanced codes which discuss specific things. So there is some improvement, I guess, on the particularly on the engineered structures, but overall the quantity of risk the urban has increased. We often talk about the fact that 58% of the country's landmass is prone to moderate to high level of earthquake risk. But what we don't point out is that in that 60% or little less than 60% area, more than three-fourths of the population lives. And that disproportionality is set to increase. So our exposure to earthquakes is extremely high. I think nearly 75 to 80% of the country's population lives in areas which are exposed to moderate to high earthquake risk. So in that context, I think it is very important that we need to articulate a very clear economic case for investment in earthquake risk reduction. The challenge with earthquakes, unlike landslides or cyclones or floods, is that earthquakes can be classified as low frequency, high impact events. So we tend to forget what has happened before, and we tend to lose sight of what could happen in the future. So, but if we make an economic case, then perhaps it would be more compelling for everyone to stay focused on reducing earthquake risk. I'll give you one example. Uh, an advanced country like Japan experienced an earthquake in Kobe in January 1995. Kobe is a shipping port. Kobe was one of the most advanced ports in Asia. And it was doing a lot of business. A lot of shipping companies would run their business out of Kobe, and it was a major source of income, and it contributed a great deal to the Japanese economy. After the 1995 earthquake, despite the fact that the Japanese authorities did innovative things to quickly restore the operations of the Kobe port, but Kobe never regained its top slot in the shipping industry. A nearby South Korean port of Busan took over, and Kobe still lags behind. So the economic lead that they had was lost almost forever. So the point I'm trying to make is that if we aspire to be $1 billion economy, protecting our capital assets, our economic activity, our people is has to be an integral part of it. And earthquakes cause huge shocks to capital assets and economic activity. So it's really important that we make an economic case. The second point I want to make is that we really need to uh, seismic mission 2, 3, 4, 5 to actually looking at our urban areas and begin to generate scenarios. And when I talk about generating scenarios, these scenarios have to be not just about what is the kind of intensity we can experience in a particular city. These scenarios also don't have to be only about the number of lives that will be at risk. It is also not about the aggregate economic impact, aggregate sort of financial impact, or in terms of loss of capital assets. It has to go beyond to look at how the systems across this will be affected. How, if you have, phone towers going down, the ATMs will not work. If the ATM people don't have access to the cash, markets don't work, the whole range of interconnections that are much more complex compared to what they were 10 years, 20 years ago. I don't know if you've watched the news over the last few days. Garmin, which basically is a producer of sports wearables, GPS watches, but they don't just produce GPS watches, but they also produce navigation and everything. Since Thursday, from Thursday to Sunday, their systems were down globally. And the impact is still being evaluated, how huge the impact was across the world of that disruption. And and this is of course most likely it was a malicious cyber attack on the system. But a lot of these things can happen through non-malicious events as well, such as earthquakes as well. I'm just giving an example that we really need to take a systems view of risk and see how interconnections get affected. The third thing that I want to say is that it is an often repeated refrain that we really need to work in a multidisciplinary way. I mean, addressing the issues of earthquake risk in our urban areas. Uh, the disciplines that need to be involved in looking at earthquake risk are many. I will not list all of them, but I just want to highlight that even within the earthquake sort of community, sometimes I feel that there isn't enough dialogue between seismologists and geotechnical engineers and earthquake structural engineers, earthquake engineers, architects. I think even in the technical community, what to talk about a broader realm, technical in the sense, engineering and science sense, what to talk of a broader set of actors, including sociologists, etc. So, for example, we have the microzonation of Delhi, which was produced in 2016. So we have taken a shipping dockyard approach, which is that you produce the microzonation, put it on a table, and expect that somebody will come and take it and use it. And I would like to see examples of how that microzonation has been turned into something which is understandable, actionable. People who are actually designing buildings, designing uh, little townships within Delhi are actually using that microzonation to inform their planning and design. Disciplinarity is something which needs to be emphasized. The fourth point is that I would really like to see that there needs to be much greater and much more informed social demand for earthquake resilience. We can say as much as we want about the fact that the buildings don't comply with the building codes. They are not designed properly for earthquake. People begin to demand earthquake resilience as their right. But at the same time, I have to say that disaster risk management is an area where everybody has to play a role. It's not just the government, but it's also for people to play a role. So everybody is a duty bearer as well as a rights holder in this context. So creating demand for that so that people demand disaster resilience, play their own role in disaster resilience with respect to earthquakes is my fourth point. My fifth point is that we really have to see how we can integrate earthquake risk management issues in the master plans. Our master plans do recognize hazards, but they do it in a very superficial manner. It would be good to explore to what extent the whole planning process is informed by the best knowledge we have on risks, geography. uh, how is the microzonation of Delhi going to inform the master planning of Delhi? So that is very important, and that will then inform how we locate facilities of varying level of importance in different parts of Delhi. So really integrating the whole notion of earthquake risk in the urban planning process is absolutely critical as we move forward. So with these 5 points, I would again like to thank you, Dr. Amir Ali Khan and General Bindal and colleagues present at this webinar for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts. And I look forward to engaging with you this afternoon as well as in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for nicely describing those 5 points to reduce the risk in urban areas from earthquakes. You rightly mentioned, definitely we are have to go a long way in integrating the master planning with the earthquake risk mitigation. Liquefaction, Sharma Saab, ML Sharma Saab is going to talk about that as well. So, how to use microzonation into our master planning for earthquake risk mitigation. Several points, your 5 points are definitely are the highlights which we are going to deliberate, and definitely we are talking about many of those aspects in our strategy for earthquake risk mitigation. So now let's move ahead and request Professor Ravi Sinha Saab to uh, talk about earthquake risk of urban areas in India and mitigation strategies. And before I request Sinha Saab to uh, take over, let me have a brief introduction of Professor Ravi Sinha as well. Professor Ravi Sinha is currently Professor of Civil Engineering at IIT Bombay. He's have he has completed his masters and doctoral studies from USA. He's basically an expert, hardcore expert of earthquake risk mitigation or earthquake engineering, and his area of interest include earthquake resistant design and vulnerability evaluation of structures and facilities, development and design of energy absorbing and base isolation services, service life assessment and rehabilitation of structures, vibration control of structures and equipment, active disaster mitigation and management, experimental techniques in structural dynamics. In addition to that, Professor Sinha has contributed a lot at various levels, at national level, at state level in Mumbai, and at the local level. So Sinha Saab is instrumental in developing so many things at the national level. He was instrumental in post-disaster reconstruction programs in Latur and Bhuj, which I can say with confidence, in addition to others. Sinha Saab has also been instrumental in developing that disaster management master plan for Mumbai. And we saw those results of that master availability of that master plan in recent cyclone, which hit Mumbai with limited damage and limited impact. So Sinha Saab is quite actively engaged not only in earthquake risk mitigation but the entire gamut of disaster risk mitigation at various levels, including national level, state level, and local level. And he's one of the prominent persons associated and guiding us at NIDM in a big way. So, with these brief words, I request Professor Ravi Sinha to take over and speak about the risk of urban areas in India and mitigation strategies. Professor Ravi Sinha, sir.
So thank you, Dr. Amir. First of all, I would like to congratulate NIDM for organizing this webinar and also other several really important webinars. This is a time when we are facing one major disaster, and as we are facing it, it is worthwhile also focusing on other major disasters which may come in future, so that we have the right kind of motivation, so that we are better prepared for it. Urban disasters are extremely critical to the basic survival as a prosperous country for us. So it's very important to discuss that and see where we are and what we can do further. And in this regard, I would like to just share the experience of Mumbai, which would highlight some of the things which Shri Kamal Kishore already pointed out regarding the 5 major mantras he said. And I'll show you how some of them have been implemented in one case so that they can also be an example for the other cities to follow. So I would be focusing on risk mitigation for urban areas. Now, in order to do that, we have to first understand uh, like what is the situation with our cities in India? Can we, to what extent are we able to take the example from other global cities? So if we just look at the last two census data which are available for the major cities in India, and if we just look at the last column, then we are looking at population densities consistently well over 10,000 persons per square kilometer. And this is actually quite different from the cities, global cities, which are supposed to do a lot for disaster management. So New York City, for example, the New York metropolitan area, it's one of the most advanced in terms of disaster risk management, has a population density of only 1,800 per square kilometer. Tokyo, Yokohama, which is the world's largest urban agglomeration, has a population density of 4,400 per square kilometer. London urban area for 5,900. These are all very different from the kind of density which we have in the Indian major cities. Then if you look at the the way the cities are increasing in size. So again, if you look at the last column, the decadal increase in population in India, so they are consistently at rates which are unheard of in the major global urban cities. So what this leads to is the fact that while the examples of what are happening in major global urban areas are important to us, they cannot be completely capturing our situation. We also have all these other complexities which we need to take into account in preparing the disaster risk management of our cities. So, what I was saying is again summarized here, that the growth of urban infrastructure has not and cannot keep pace with the increase in population, because we are just not able to invest sufficiently. And also, what is to be kept in mind, that only a small fraction of population increase in the cities is organic. Less than 50% is inorganic through migration. And what is important to recognize over here is that the economic status of a large fraction of migrants is less than the economic status of the people already living in the cities. And that is the reason why they are migrating to the cities. And also the fact that most of the migrants have low resilience to disruptions, as we have seen in the case of the pandemic when the migrant laborers started moving out. It's because they don't have the resilience to withstand this while continuing to live in the cities. Then in addition, we also have seasonal migration. So those are the permanent migrants. We also have seasonal migration, which depends on the farming season in the area. So what this means is that our cities are densely populated, very, very densely populated, rapidly growing. They have decreasing economic resilience because most of the new people who are coming to the city are economically worse off than the people who are already there. So through this migration, actually the average economic status is decreasing in the cities. And also, what we have to recognize is that for a large number of families which are not living in the cities, the people who have migrated to the city are the breadwinners. So, if there is a disaster to cities which affects its economic well-being, it is also going to have a basic survival challenge in many places far away from the cities themselves. Then we also have to keep in mind that our cities are typically, at least the large cities, they are the base for population and economic decision makers. And then they are also the symbols of national development. So they are basically the points of our national prestige. And major dislocation over there would have an effect on the international standing of the country, at least from the point of view of how the people in the other countries are going to view our country. So the impact of disasters to our cities would be varied, and it can be quite severe. And the effect is not going to be limited only to the city, but is likely to be likely to be spread far away. So disaster risk management basically has to consider all these factors in order to be really meaningful. So, what are the essentials of urban disaster risk management based on these are what I have given over here, that they should be based on the city's present ground realities and should also take into account the future trajectory of the city, and which includes not just the physical growth, but also the aspirational growth. Then it should quite obviously be based on science and knowledge. It should not be perception. We have seen the mistakes which happen again. And it to comply with the relevant laws and the rules. So there has to be good understanding of the relevant laws and rules in order to do a good disaster risk management plan. It should conform to international standards. Best practices should be incorporated in it. It should consider the governance and institutional capacities. So we should not impose a responsibility on an entity which is clearly not capable of delivering. We need to understand what is their capacity, what kind of strengthening they need, and so on. And it brings me to the last point, that it should be implementable and it should be sustainable. So it's not a one-time thing. There has to be annual budget allocated to it. And what all this is coming to is the fact that in order to really make a difference on the ground, what we need is not a disaster risk plan. What we need is a disaster risk master plan, something which is going to stand for decades, where phases are taken up in different sequences as per the requirement and as per the ability. And how this can be done, and also the points which were raised by Sri Kamal Kishore, how they can be implemented on the ground, I will just show you through an illustration. and that is through the Mumbai Disaster Risk Management Master Plan. So the Disaster Risk Management Master Plan for Mumbai was developed about a decade ago, between 2009 to 2011, and it was taken as a partnership between the municipal corporation, EMI, and IIT Bombay. And the implementation of the DRMMP, because the master plan, it's a multi-decade plan, implementation has been going on for the last 10 years, and it will continue to be implemented for several years in the future. And one of the important outcomes which you can see right now is that during the pandemic, Mumbai is the only Indian city where the management has been recognized as the responsibility of the municipal corporation. If you look at any other Indian city, the responsibility is that of the state government, where the municipal corporation plays a helping hand, not the other way around. So here, in the case of Mumbai, it was possible for the state government to have the confidence that they can focus on other parts of the state and only provide helping hand where required and let Mumbai Municipal Corporation do the heavy hitting. Now, just imagine if this kind of a thing was prevalent in all the other cities also, how much more the government resources would have been available to focus away from the cities in the areas which, for example, now are the growing hotspots. So these are the advantages we get when we take a master plan approach. And how exactly this master plan was done is what I'm going to just show you. So first of all, for any kind of master planning, who are the participants? So in the case of Mumbai, we finally recognize that it's not just the Mumbai Municipal Corporation. There are actually 119 important stakeholders which will have a role in the disaster risk management master planning. A lot of them are from the government, but also include several private players. And we requested all of them to appoint nodal officers for the master planning process. Then we also had an advisory committee headed by the municipal commissioner, which had the participation from all the other stakeholders like the commissioner of police and so many others. And then we created focus groups. So we divided the work into 5 focus groups, and each focus group was headed by a very senior officer and had participation from the relevant stakeholder organization, both in terms of the government organization as well as where required in terms of scientific organizations. And broadly, the focus groups looked at the legal and institutional arrangement, looked at the hazard, vulnerability, and risk, looked at shelter and risk resiliency, looked at urban development and construction standards and practices, basically the master plan and the bylaw issues, looked into emergency management, basic response, social mobilization, particularly post-disaster mobilization requirement, and also education in terms of capacity building. So the work we carried out were in 4 phases. Phase 1 was to create the organization and the processes through which the master plan gets developed. And these phases are actually very standard for any kind of master plan, whether you do a city master plan, whether you do a disaster master plan, or whether you do a 5-year master plan for the country and so on. So this is quite a common process which we just mapped in the case of disaster risk management master plan. So phase 1 was organization and process. Phase 2 was the diagnosis and analysis. Phase 3 was the DRMP framework. And phase 4 was the implementation of the framework. Phase 2 and phase 3 obviously took the maximum time and also had significant overlap. Phase 1 was very short, and what was important is that all through it was a participatory process. Almost nothing in the master planning process was top down. And that was the important thing. And secondly, all along, there was significant training and capacity building or competency building for not just the people from the government organizations, but also for all the other stakeholder organizations. And we prepared the disaster risk management in 9 sections. So there are 9 components of it. First were the legal and institutional arrangement. I'll just run through them very quickly because the idea is not to tell you how it was done over here, but just to let you know that these were done. And if you are involved in the disaster risk management master plan process for your area, then you have to know that these would have a role to play. So hazard, vulnerability, and risk analysis. And this also includes the earthquake risk assessments I'm going to talk about in a moment. Then emergency management, looking into very intensively on the response requirement and how it can be achieved. Shelter and disaster risk resiliency requirement. And it's not just the housing, it also includes water, storm drain, and wastewater. Urban development, ensuring that future plans are better than the past. Construction codes and standards, compliance is a big issue, so we looked into how to strengthen them. Training and capacity building, cutting across all these other components. Then also advocacy and strategic communication, also cutting across all these other components. And lastly, GIS and information technology. We decided that if this kind of a master plan has to live, it cannot be a paper-based thing. It has to be a GIS-based system. It has to live. It has to be integrated into the IT system of all the other organizations and be in harmony with them. So the deliverables were a number of aspects of master plan and framework of DRMP, then the strategic implementation plan. Then we developed several indicators of risk and resiliency so that it is possible to monitor the progress being made over time. And for each of the sectors which we had selected, we had analysis report of the sector. So these were the deliverables. A number of deliverables were given to the city. So, for example, this is the DRMP framework, which was done for the city. And say, but this is a risk assessment. For example, the earthquake risk assessment. What you are able to see in the black lines at the center of the figure is the map of the city, and those black lines are showing the different wards of the city. And then all the thin lines which you are seeing are various seismic sources near the city. The squares which you see are past earthquakes which are in the catalog. And the red dot which you're seeing is one of the earthquake events which we considered for the risk assessment. And for that earthquake event, which was magnitude 6.5 earthquake occurring, where the red star is shown. So here, this shows what is the shaking intensity in different parts of the city, taking into account all the information which was available. And as you can see, that there is an index given over there. And basically, broadly, the closer you are to where the earthquake source is, the stronger is the shaking. But it doesn't matter if the shaking is stronger in terms of disaster risk management, because what you want to see is where is the damage, number one, and number two, in the damage, what kind of consequence is occurring. So for example, where are the injuries, where are the deaths, and if they can be predicted beforehand, then in the event of an actual earthquake occurring, mobilization of resources could be done with prior knowledge without having to wait for feedback to come. So in this case, for example, this is showing the injury grid maps. And again, the darker the color, higher is the intensity of injuries. So here now it can be seen that in the event of that particular earthquake, when the initial focus has to be made on where the medical teams have to be sent, there is a very good understanding of the specific locations where the medical teams have to be sent. Because it is not that that you have to wait for information, because people are going to be overwhelmed with what is the kind of information coming in. Also, there is a situation many times the informations are duplicated and so on. So they can be avoided by having a prior information of where to focus. And same thing regarding deaths. And what is also important, which is not clear over here, is that the locations of high death intensity and location of high injury intensity are not common. Some of them are common, but some are not common. So all this kind of information can be made available through proper scientific knowledge or use of proper scientific knowledge right now. And they are extremely invaluable tools when it comes to disaster risk management master planning. So we also have the numbers, the aggregate numbers of deaths and losses and so on. They're not really that useful for risk management planning. What is important is the actual place where it has to happen, and exactly where and how we reach those places. Then the other aspects which were looked at were the legal and institutional arrangement. So if the city and the state government agencies and the private sector stakeholders, if they have to act, what are the enabling laws and acts and regulations which will enable them to do what is required to be done? And the idea is, of course, what I had mentioned at the very beginning, that it has to be embedded in the acts and the rules. So you cannot expect people to do something where there is a particular act or a law which is saying that it's illegal to do. So it has to be embedded properly. Then in terms of the response plan, which we did a lot of work on, So we developed the entire city's emergency operation plan. So it's very comprehensive. For example, this is the functional plan which you're seeing overall. In the event of some occurrence of a disaster of any kind, so let us say a bomb blast or a building collapse or a fire or so, then what is the incident response system that is also there, which is based on the Government of India guidelines on this. Then for each kind of event, we identified what is known as the emergency support function or ESF. So 14 ESFs, and they are cross-cutting, and depending on which disaster has occurred, one or more of them get activated. And each of these ESF has several dozen agencies which participate in them, which has one agency as the as a nodal agency and others as the support agencies. And these are not just agencies of the municipal corporation. Some of them, the nodal agency is the state government agency. In one of them, the nodal agency is the central government agency. And then this is so that what I had shown you earlier was the functional plan for the emergency operations center. Now this is the physical plan of the emergency operations center. This is actually implemented now. So it's a proper physical plan. So who sits where, why, what kind of communication goes on in case of, what is the IT communication, what is the verbal or hand communication and so on. They all worked out depending on the situation, and people are trained regularly on this. Then the other kinds of studies or other kinds of indicators of risk because of earthquakes. For example, here on the right-hand side, it's the water supply. So the resiliency of the water supply because of the same scenario earthquake is shown over here. On the left-hand side, it's a requirement of the tertiary distribution system. So what kind of disruption would be there, and because of that, what kind of temporary water supply system would have to be put in place. So Mumbai is a city with more than 50% of the population living in slums. But just because somebody is living in slum doesn't mean that those people have very low capacity. Sometimes the slum people can also have significant resiliency. So this is actually mapping the slum resiliency. Then this is we developed a risk atlas with a lot of information. And these are some of the maps which are showing on the risk atlas, which is with the city so that they can understand what is required. And then these are the performance indicators which we developed. There were 10 of them. And then we had a series of advocacy and awareness campaigns also in place. And so just showing some of the deliverables which have been developed as part of the process. And the idea is to highlight again and again that you do a little bit and it seems that it is making an effect, but it may not be. You actually need to have a comprehensive view. And we also understood some challenges which came out of that. So one of the interesting challenge was that the municipal corporation functioning is highly centralized. And in fact, if we map the current function with the acts and the laws, then there's a dichotomy because the acts expect a lot more decentralization than what is actually available. Secondly, the strategic planning process is not widely practiced. So long-term plans on disaster risk management then has its own challenges unless it is done with a very strong top-level support. And then the external stakeholders, they were not that forthcoming. They were waiting for the municipal corporation to take the lead. And also we saw that this is again something which you see in most government organizations, is that the decision making is quite top down, even though there are requirements of having a good mix of top down and bottom up initiatives. So this is also something which causes problems. So basically, what I'm trying to highlight is that if we are very, very serious about disaster risk management for our cities, then shortcuts will not work. We have to focus on the essentials. And this is just a list of essentials which we had shown, which I had shown earlier. So if we don't do all of it, then we may do something which is better than what was there previously, but then one has to question how effective it is. And in that regard, I will just mention recently during TV interview, one of the doctors talking about the pandemic. So he was sharing his experience, and he said that when there is a patient with 50% oxygen saturation level, even if you increase to 60%, the survival probability doesn't change much. So you have to always focus not just on what you are doing to improve, but what is the target of improvement. And if the target of improvement is not coming, then in that case, you have to question on what you have to do differently. So with this, I will end my talk and just again thank NIDM for this opportunity and reiterate the importance of the issue of urban disaster risk management and the importance of taking a holistic and comprehensive approach on the entire thing. So thank you very much.
So thank you so much, sir, for the very elaborative and exhaustive presentation on disaster management master plan for Mumbai. Uh, as I told in the beginning in your introduction, it's really successful the process which you have gone through, and Mumbai is definitely seeing some good results out of that. So it's very comprehensive, and it's showing its results at least. So we'll discuss towards the end, and there are a few questions, and I will raise those questions towards the end. As we are definitely slightly behind the schedule. Now, I request Professor Utpal Sharma sir, for disaster resilient urban planning in India, experiences and initiatives in context of disaster management. So, as far Professor Sharma is concerned, Professor Sharma is a well-known urban planner who has already served almost 30, 40 years in this profession, not only as a teacher in various engineering college, basically the SAP, but as a professional and delivered so many things in the area of risk mitigation in urban context. Professor Sharma is having currently the Dean and Director at the Institute of Architecture and Planning at Nirma University, but he has served, as I told, has served very, very long even at SAP, Center for Environmental Planning and Technology in Ahmedabad, and he's basically recognized for his wonderful work on urban risk mitigation. Professor Sharma is an alumnus of IIT Roorkee. He did his Bachelor of Architecture from IIT Roorkee, and since then he's doing a lot of work in the area of planning and urban development. So I could not find a better person than Professor Sharma to talk about the experiences and challenges of disaster resilient urban planning in India. So with this brief introduction, I request Professor Utpal Sharma sir to take over and share his experiences of disaster risk mitigation in urban context. Professor Utpal Sharma.
Thank you very much, and I hope I'll be able to do the justice that that you have imposed on me. Yes, I have done some work for various cities across India, which has given me some exposure to the various issues that are happening in various places. And I will share a small presentation to highlight various issues of earthquake risk mitigation and urban planning. Share.
ठीक है, the committee can help with that also. Yes, yes. हाँ हाँ ठीक है, absolutely. We'll be.
Wait for a minute. upload my presentation just. Yeah.
share screen कैसे करते हैं?
How to do the screen share? I'm doing it from my iPad.
No, you go to share on the top of the screen, and you will find the mechanism to share. Go to share.
हाँ अब आया. अच्छा.
I share screen. Okay.
Which if they can see.
Okay.
Ask if they can see.
Now we can see your screen. Now, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I'm making a presentation on earthquake risk mitigation. And the first slide that you see is a slide of the one famous Mansi Tower in Ahmedabad, which got totally damaged. People had built some swimming pool on the terraces. Now, these are the issues of, I'm going to use the example from all over the country. These are some of the areas what we call the peri-urban development. This is outside the city of Ahmedabad Urban Development Authority. You may have beautiful housing societies, but the development has happened without any plan. And by the time the authority has decided to make a plan, almost all the areas are fully developed. So we have maybe properly engineered building which without any proper road connectivity and urban infrastructure. In this situation, it became very, very difficult to really talk about urban planning and disaster risk mitigation. These are areas which are prone for disaster risk mitigation. Now, other issues of Indian cities are there are a lot of urban villages within this city, and we take away all the land of the urban villages, and the village is marked in the kind of a lal dora area, and we almost leave it for it to die. There are all kind of building construction. There's no building regulation that happens there, and these are very highly dense population. They live there, and these are very risky areas. From my hometown called Guwahati, what if I was doing the master plan for the city of Guwahati? So most of the time, we may have a beautiful master plan prepared for the city, but actually on ground, it doesn't really happen because we are totally dependent on land acquisition as a model to create the road, open spaces, and amenities. And actually, very little thing that happens on the ground. And when you have less area allocated for road, open space, and amenities, the building regulation doesn't really matter because the infrastructure and social facility has to be linked with the intensity of use of land. So if the link is not there, then the whole issue of making a building on a piece of land itself is to be questioned. Now, if you put it all together, you find that there are not adequate roads, there are not adequate open spaces, very little primary education, secondary education maybe is okay, very little recreational facility, then no medical facility. This is not only for my city like Guwahati, but for all the large cities, except for the metropolitan. But this is a typical scenario for most of the Indian cities where we are lacking the basic infrastructure, physical and social infrastructure, and without which we cannot really talk about earthquake risk mitigation in a plot of land. Now, we have already talked about Mumbai. I think it is a very comprehensive plan. I'm just showing you this is Dharavi. So basically, what you find that there's only 6% of the land of the city accommodate 54% of the population. And this is where people live in this situation of 3,000 persons per hectare. Now here it is risk for earthquake, risk for fire, risk for COVID, everything that is happening here. You find situations where we have very inadequate toilet facilities, water supply, etc. The people live in a very pathetic condition. And in this situation, we have to find a way to solve this problem, whether we talk about earthquake risk mitigation or otherwise. Maybe it is possible to talk about redevelopment of some of these slums. And the low-rise, high-density will allocate open spaces and a little bit of sellable component on the periphery. So we need major redevelopment effort for most upper slums so that we can create better living conditions for the people who are also safe. Now, I have been right now work for the city of Shimla. You find that how dangerous the city is. Now, old part of Shimla is very beautifully done. Now the municipal or a town planning department, they have not developed any new areas. They give permission to people to build on slopey and difficult land. Maybe the building is properly designed, structural design is also fine, but you find the building is hanging on the hill slope, and these are very dangerous situations. Just because we do not have a mechanism for land development, instead of developing a totally new town or area, we are giving building permission for people to do, and we're creating a dangerous situation. This is for Shimla, this is for Guwahati, this is for Shillong, it is for Dehradun. Situation like these are all very dangerous, and we need to really do the mapping, and we also need to say that where no construction should be allowed. Ravi has already shown, so we have to build in all these fault lines and the disaster-prone areas into the master plan, and we can protect. Now we have technical know-how with the GIS application. All these different layers of information can be put together and built in areas on which is a very safe, and under difficult area we can avoid it. There are possible ways to do it. So many times the issues are multiple. When you have earthquake, it also may be hills, landslide. There are also flood. And this is for my city, Guwahati, with very little rainfall, whole city goes underwater, the landslides, and encroachment on some of the government land. And all this put together make the city very, very risky. In Indian cities, what you find is that we are highly dense at the core, and we have not really developed around. Look at cities like London or Johannesburg or Berlin. So as the city has become bigger, we provided the infrastructure for the surrounding areas and it reduced the peak of densities. We have very, very high density in the core, and that means that within the existing building, we are making it more and more dense. Every room has a family, or we have done some illegal construction over the same building. And these are very dangerous situations. And this is not really a kind of a structural analysis of a building, but this situation has to stop. So we have to expand our cities and allow the city to expand and provide the required infrastructure, and the peak has to come down. The problem is that our planning model that we borrowed from the British, like we talk about low density, high quality infrastructure, which we can never become. Because presently with a high density, very poor infrastructure. We cannot become like where all the ministers and other people in Delhi are living in bungalows. It is not possible to be done for all the people of India. So we have to build it high density with very good quality infrastructure. So we have to create a model for our low rise, high density built form with proper infrastructure for both for the Indian cities. Now, this is for the city of Hyderabad, which had a chance for making a plan. All the different layers of water body, drainage line, forest, quality, including the, even if you have a fault line or some area to be protected, all these stuff can be mapped and superimposed, and it is possible to identify the area that is marked in green, that these areas should not be touched because they are environmentally very sensitive, or it can be prone to disaster. We can build only in the areas which are marked in dark brown color, and so that city plan can be built according after the suitably analyzing the environmental suitability of the land with respect to various parameters, including the issues of earthquake and other disasters. And this should be done for all the Indian cities. Built into the master plan for all the Indian cities. Because other you have microzonation map, you have some information that is available, but it is never integrated in the city plan. We have to create a process, maybe the NDMA, NIDM should deal with the Ministry of Urban Development, see that all the different layers of information related to the disaster is built into the future master plan of Indian cities. So that it is not about proclaiming the plan is good, but the plan is saying that how we have avoided the difficult areas and built into suitable land. issues in India, again for the city of Hyderabad, that we never prepare a local area plan, never prepare a zonal plan, because it means the acquisition of land. And we just have a broad city road network, everything is done at plot level without any infrastructure. This is from the high-tech city of Hyderabad, which had a chance to work. You can see before we got into the picture, almost all the area is totally encroached. And this is Indian cities. We are not going to get a clean slate of land to really do urban development. So what we are doing is like a patchwork, and we can still have to make some sense out of this situation. And this is actually now worked out. The city is now successful. This is the IT capital of Hyderabad and possible to work out. So basically, one can build all the layers of information and still make a success out of it. But we have to be methodical and systematic and not that one time you do something. Now, basically, what it means is that for the disaster risk mitigation, that you need to have a land management mechanism. You cannot only depend on land acquisition. And Gujarat and Maharashtra had a maybe town planning scheme where the share or land pooling system where everybody gave 40 to 50% of the land for road, open space, and amenities free of cost. And we practice in Japan and other parts of the world, where the rest of the India all depends on land acquisition. Municipality doesn't to pay for the salary of the staff, forget about the acquiring land and building something. So basically, the whole chaos continues, and we find a way to stop this. Coming back to Bhuj, you can one of my experts has already said the whole city has been totally destroyed. Disaster also created an opportunity to create a better network of roads and connectivity which was not there before. We can see before, after, the network has improved. And for it's a disaster can create an opportunity for a city if you do forget about the life loss and the property loss, but the city infrastructure can be put together in a proper way. Now, here the whole land pooling mechanism that they work to deduct a certain land from every plot and a network that is there, everybody contributed. Now the Bhuj is again back at the thriving city. So these kind of details need to be worked out for most of the other Indian cities as well. The other thing that we want to highlight is the whole issue of urban redevelopment. Most of the Indian cities, almost 70 to 80% of the buildings are non-engineered buildings. Their life is already over. We talk about urban redevelopment on a plot of land. But what is required for some of the cities, including Mumbai, certain areas need to be totally redeveloped if possible. And that's sort of road connectivity, infrastructure, social facility, then have buildings which follow the regulations and the zoning codes. And different cities have already done it. And it is time for India also to look into the whole process of urban redevelopment in a big way. These are some typical buildings in Amsterdam, where many of the buildings got damaged. We had many of the buildings got damaged not because the structural design was faulty, but there's a problem with the building regulations. We had allowed for people to make balconies all over the building so that you can increase the FAR from 8 to 4.5. And we have only balconies that are actually not balconies, they're brought into the inside the room. That becomes a room, and you have a column in the middle of the room. So many times the columns are shifted. And you have the whole structural system is non-stabilized. So you have a column and suddenly the column goes missing. And we find that in that situation, the building just collapses. And many of the buildings in the particular higher income group areas have been severely damaged or fallen down. There are other issues of building which have a hollow plinth for parking and without any kind of a plinth beam, etc., etc. The building has just gone down one floor and the building is finished. So many of these fault in the building regulations have been now. But I don't think you have to wait for a disaster to happen to the proper building regulations. And we should do it for maybe the most of the cities. You also need to look at the building regulation and do the corrective measure based on the learning that we already have. Now, comparatively, like our old city of Ahmedabad, it's so good. It's a UNESCO heritage city now, but the basic framework is wood. It's structure with an infill wall. Nothing happened to any building in the old city of Ahmedabad because Maybe that Ahmedabad knew that it was an earthquake-prone area. The forefathers have actually built the foundation of the city with a wood frame structure, and it has stood the earthquake and all other disasters. So, as a summary, I'm saying that we have to look from macro to the micro level. So, you have to peri-urban growth of the city needs to be controlled from metropolitan plan. All the natural features, etc., to be mapped, superimposed, including fault line and a sensitive area or sinking zone, etc. One can create the suitable then built only on those areas which are not dangerous at all. We have to have some land development tool like land pooling scheme or transfer of development right, etc. to make the zonal plan happen on ground. And we need to talk about also look at appropriate planning steps to respect to open spaces, facilities, and amenities which already have, but maybe they are not adequate enough. We also have to, can we leave a 5 to 6% land in every city for slum redevelopment on its own? Let people build a house of their own with a 25, 30 square meter of land in an incremental way, rather than putting them at 30-story tower in the name of redevelopment. So we have to modify the building regulations, and so that from the city level to the zonal level, at a local level, all the three layers, we need some corrective measures, and it has to be comprehensive so that we can talk about disaster risk mitigation for Indian cities and towns. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for nice and quite elaborate presentation on challenges which we are facing. And definitely, you have already shared several experiences throughout the country. I'm having certain questions which have been raised by some of the participants, but I will take it up slightly different. So let's
Yes.
move to the next speaker, Professor M.L. Sharma. M.L. Sharma Sahab is going to speak seismic hazard of urban areas and elements of microzonation in this mitigation. So before I hand over the screen to Sharma Sahab. Sharma Sahab is basically a professor at Earthquake Engineering Department at IIT Roorkee. He has done his PhD and everything from IIT Roorkee. He is basically having a specialization in applied physics. So this is a good combination, and Professor Sharma is going to talk about microzonation and all these things. So Professor Sharma has uh, a wide experience of serving in different capacities uh, in the university or IIT Roorkee. So, but he has already served. He's currently serving as Dean Finance and Planning. He was head of the Department of Earthquake Engineering. He has organized so many events at department level. He has been associated with a large number of professional societies and bodies. So, with this brief introduction, I request Professor Sharma to uh, take from here. But before that, Professor Sharma's interests include engineering seismology, seismic microzonation, seismic hazard assessment, from ground motion prediction. So, with this brief introduction of Professor M.L. Sharma, I request him to take over and take us through seismic hazard of urban areas and elements of microzonation and risk mitigation. Professor Sharma, sir, please.
Thank you, Professor Amir. Thank you very much. I'm thankful to Major General Bindal and Mr. Amir for giving me this opportunity to talk about the seismic hazard among a panel of stalwarts like Professor Sinha, Shri Kamal Kishoreji, and our own student, Professor Saurabh. So here I will be talking about microzonation. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, it's coming. Yes, yes. It's there.
Yes. So I have given the duty of telling you about the seismic hazard of urban areas and its relevance to microzonation and risk. As very rightly pointed out by the that these microzonation and the risk assessment exercises and mitigation exercises, they must be a part of the urban planning. So what I will be doing is I will be taking you on a tour to how to calculate the seismic hazard and how this seismic hazard is used for microzonation, and how the microzonation will in turn will be used for seismic risk mitigation and in the planning of urban cities. I have taken the example of NCR region, especially because NCR is having all kinds of sources, all kinds of typologies in built environment, all kind of social networking. So I have taken the example of NCR, and I'll take back and just go to the hazard slides, which generally the engineering seismologists they first place. So it's all because of the plate motion and Indian continent motion towards the Eurasian plate. And for last 10 million or so, it is colliding, and because of this, we are having a lot of earthquakes on the plate boundary. And not only on the plate boundary, but in between also. So now, how to just justify the earthquakes which are happening in Delhi or in South India? It is because of the dynamism of the whole plate. So we cannot say that the earthquakes are happening on the plate boundary, but they are happening within the plate, but the characteristics are a little different. And as an engineer and as an urban planner, we must understand the difference in the characteristics of the earthquakes which are happening on the boundaries and which are happening within the plate. Now, let us come back to the Delhi example. Delhi is somewhere here. So if I see the tectonic framework, and tectonic means the forces which are there, right? And they are applied, and the results are the thrust or the faults or the earthquakes themselves. So this area is having a lot of seismogenic sources around it, and you can see the earthquake activity at the boundary and as well as around Delhi. So if I see the earthquakes within Delhi, then there is a lot of clustering. And this clustering may be because of the local faults which are available and which are dynamic system within the NCR region. And they may be the ridges like the Delhi Atmar Ridge or the now Delhi Ridge. They are the secondary ridges which can participate in generating the earthquake. All the faults directly, say for example the Mathura fault, the Sona fault, the Great Boundary fault which is near to this, the Muradabad fault. So these are all the fault system which is very near to Delhi, and we can expect the local earthquakes. In addition to the earthquakes from Himalayas, we can expect the local earthquakes also in Delhi. If we see I'm happy to see that we are now having the webinar on the 300th year of Delhi earthquake. Not only Delhi, there were many earthquakes which are around 6 and but less than 7 because of the potential of the seismogenic sources. They cannot sustain a lot of energy, and that energy is released much before they can acquire the energy for a larger earthquake. So these are the earthquakes, and we can say that the Delhi area is quite seismically active. Now, these are the examples which I have just taken to remind you that, say, for example, there is a seismic telemetry network deployed by IMD and now the National Center for Seismology. These are the earthquakes. You can see a lot of blue and red dots, which is between 2001 and 2004. And these beach balls, they are showing us that they are in the different directions. I mean, they are not from the same source, but they are acting in different directions. Somehow, in the last few months, we have been recording many seismic activities. Say, for example, from May to 3rd July, we have recorded almost 15 earthquakes which are happening here around Delhi. And these earthquakes, they are not only recorded by the seismic network, but a network which we have deployed in Himalayas also. This network is for the Erie Dam, consisting of 18 stations, and we are getting the real-time online data. And whenever there is earthquake within few seconds, we can give the source parameters of that. So that exercise is also going on. So these are the earthquakes which were reported for last few months, and people are saying that whether the seismic activity has increased or there may be earthquake of larger magnitude in this area. We should not interpret these things like this, because this is a dynamic system. The faults are interacting with each other, and these are the return periods of these magnitudes 2, 3, 4, 5, and they are statistically done. So for a seismologist, they are happening, of course, frequently, but not exactly giving the interpretation that there may be a large earthquake. It cannot also be denied, because the sources are not studied so much. But it cannot, on the other hand, cannot be said that they are the signals for the large earthquake. Now, to have the seismic hazard means the expected ground motion in time to come in terms of acceleration, velocity, or the response spectrum. But this ground motion which is coming towards Delhi, this is modified by the local soil conditions. And these local soil conditions, they give totally different scenario. What you get if that soil column was not there. And that's my objective in this webinar, to show that seismic microzonation is a very necessary part where it will be giving the ground motion. Say, for example, if I take the regional study, then the 2% accidents in 50 years may be 0.25 or something like this around Delhi. But when I put the local soil columns, it will totally change. And why it is the local soil is different? Because of the geology. You can see these green and blue and red patches. And these white ones, they are the alluvium. Then you have the Delhi system, in which Ajamgarh, Sri, and Alwar, they are all rock types. So what I mean is here, I'm not going into the geological details of this, that at every place, the rock type below your building is different. And therefore, the expected ground motion will be modified by that column, and you expect a different ground motion just when you are with your neighbor who is on other kind of soil column. And this is experienced in many aspects, that your house is perfectly okay, and the neighbor's house has got a lot of damage because it was on a different kind of soil. So these things, they matter. What other things they matter other than the geology? The bad rock, how deep it is that, then the depth of the water level, because of the liquefaction, it plays important role in that. Then the geology of the region, you can see it's all heterogeneous. I mean, you cannot just give one map by considering one kind of rock to the ground motion of Delhi. And that's why the seismic microzonation of Delhi was carried out by the IMD, EREC, and I was part of that, calculating the seismic hazard at the bedrock and surface, and to carry out the soil characterization of Delhi. And we have given this, so some information is already available to the government. Now, for this Delhi, and let me give you this. This is a schematic diagram which I could make. Please try to understand. These are the Himalayas, where you have a high magnitude sources which can generate low frequency. So low frequencies will be propagated towards Delhi. This is Delhi Hardwar Ridge, and Delhi Hardwar Ridge, as per the geophysicists or seismologists or those who are working with seismic waves, they say that the guided waves will be there, and there may be a focusing effect, which may give more motion towards Delhi. Then you have the local seismotectonic features. This is the Mathura and Sona fault and Great Mountain fault and all those faults which I have told you. Then, because of the different kind of rock, these soil columns, you have the local amplification. When the seismic wave enters into the softer soil having low velocity, shear wave velocity, there is a lot of amplification. So this amplification will be different at on places, and the liquefaction also is calculated by that. Then you have the different typology, different kind of buildings, the heights of the building, their natural period. So all these factors, they are equally responsible for the damage due to the earthquake. Now, why I am saying equally and emphasizing it, because it is the building typology also, and this is the point from where we enter into the city planning, where we enter into the land use planning, where we have different kind of motions. I'll come to that, and we plan for different kind of typology, different kind of land use in the city. This is the bedrock ground motion, and then you consider the Himalayas also, and then you go for the soil amplification. So you consider the ground motion at the bedrock and go for the local soil. Not only the local soil, but also the geometric. Like in Mexico, they have the ridge effect as well as the valley effect. Here you have the basin effect. Now, let me tell you how boldly the other governments are doing and where we stand. And please hear it carefully. See the example of Taiwan. Taiwan, the most, the source which can generate large earthquake, that is available just very near to Taipei city. You have a basin which can amplify like anything. And what they have boldly done, because they have the engineering solutions with that they made the Taipei 101 just to demonstrate that they can go for high-rise buildings and a tower like 101, and they have the engineering solutions. Not only this, they have 4 of their nuclear power plants which are on the Taipei basin. So they have the source like Delhi and Himalaya. They have the Taipei basin like have the alluvium in Delhi, and they have boldly given the engineering solutions to their mega engineering projects like nuclear power plants, and they have shown boldly for the tourists the 101. Why can't we people do that? Now, this is the ground base of ground motion for Delhi, and then now if I amplify this based on the soil columns available with me, you can see this is the PGA at the surface for MC. This is the PGA for the surface at DB, and you can see the difference in the microzones. Now, this is the main slide where you can see that if I go for the ground motion of 0.1 second, 0.3 second, 0.5 second, and 1 second, the scenarios are totally different. And if the scenarios are different and the engineers they understand what's the meaning of point 1, point 3, and point 5, and 1 second in place of the typology of the buildings. They would like to go for places where you do not have the double resonance. So, or a triple resonance, maybe the low frequencies from Himalayas, then the low frequencies from the soil columns, then the low frequencies from the building itself. So this is the slide which is showing the importance of the seismic micronization to be taken into the land use planning. Now, so based on the seismic micronization, and this is the general thing that rather than the response-centric approach, we must come to the mitigation and preparedness centering approach, and we must include the seismic micronization into the city planning. With this, is over, and with the concluding remark that all of us, we are sitting here and enjoying the 300th anniversary of 1720 earthquake. It means the seismic hazard is there, and let me tell you that Japan will be enjoying the 100th anniversary of their Japanese building ordinance, which they made compulsory in Japan after the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake. Where are we? I mean, in 1923, they have made it compulsory. The government, even USA in 1933, after the Long Beach earthquake, the seismic designs are the mandatory and necessary part of the codal practices and the law. Where are we? So we have to think in this direction also. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the nice and wonderful presentation. You are ably let us understand the concept of microzonation, and I hope the participants will be able to understand the concept very clearly. And definitely, there is a need for going for microzonation and integration of microzonation studies into our land use planning thing. And but one question is coming to my mind. Let me start with you. Is that what to do with all those existing things? Like you are talking about the Delhi thing. So how to solve this issue of already built environment in those liquefiable zones?
Professor Amir, you have asked the question which I expect many times, and most of the time I'm not happy with this question. Sorry to say. I'm sorry to say. Why?
Yes.
Why? Because for the last more than 3 decades, I'm working with engineering projects. We are giving them hazard values. They are going for the seismic designs. And India is no less than any country in having mega engineering projects or mega these structures. So the engineering solutions are available with us. There is no dearth of knowledge. I don't know from where we must start with the society. That the problem is how to make it go to the society and how to make them aware, as Kamal Kishorji very rightly pointed out. They are the high return period and low return period and high impact factor events, and you know that our memory is very short. So I appeal to all the administrators that engineering solutions are available. The public is also ready to adopt these things. Let's go and to the public and apply these things. For Delhi seismic microzonation, these things are available. These are accepted by the government. Only thing is you have to take into the planning part.
Thank you, sir. So thank you so much for nicely elaborating my query or query raised by many of the participants as well. So, Professor Utpal Sharma, are you there? Okay, so let's move to Professor Ravi Sinha sir. There are queries about number one. Participants have asked, appreciated your presentation. I'm talking about Professor Ravi Sinha, and the query is there are two questions, and you have to answer in brief. One is that what is the mechanism to develop that city disaster management planning, master planning process? So, and how much time does it require? So, this is one part of the question. And second is, we are using extensively the concrete in hill areas. So, how to solve those issues? Professor Ravi Sinha sir.
Thank you, Amir. And again,
Sorry, you have to be brief because we
yeah,
are
yeah.
running short of time.
But first of all, I want to join you in congratulating all the other speakers for excellent presentations.
Definitely, no
And
doubt about that. Yes.
in terms of how much time it takes, if you just look at Mumbai's experience, then the DRMMP team consisted of about 15 experts, and about 25 people were assigned by MCGM to assist in the process, where they had to give between 25% to 50% of their time to work on DRMMP. So basically, it was a team of about 40 people who did it, and then the time required was 2 years. So that is for a city the size of Mumbai. Other cities can use this as a guidance. The key point is that it cannot be done by external experts. The work has
Yes.
to be done by the city. So there have to be people, a large team in the city who have to devote time as part of their office. That is the important thing. Second is that what kind of construction on the hill slopes. So as an engineer, I can say that you can construct anything you want as long as the engineering is done properly. There are cost implications of choices being made depending on what kind of material is chosen or depending on the architectural detail. But there is very little where you can say that this kind of construction should not be allowed. What is important is good engineering instead of the choice of material. So anything is possible on the hill slopes. So that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Professor Utpal Sharma sir. Yes, you are there. So, lot of appreciation from the participants about your presentation. There are several queries, but I am just confining myself to raise one question on behalf of the participants. The question is, almost all cities, all urban areas have the unauthorized colonies or slums. Slums we are resettling or redeveloping. Unauthorized colonies are being regularized. So, what is the solution for in earthquake risk mitigation sphere that those regularized unauthorized colonies, like in Delhi, we had one incident few years back with complete building collapse during the rainy season. So without any shaking, and it's happening throughout the country, like in Mumbai, like in Delhi, like in other cities. So this is the thing. So solution, in your opinion, about the regularized unauthorized colonies. As I told earlier, we are in the process of regularizing another set of 1,700 colonies. So, in brief, please, you can elaborate on this.
Yeah, my suggestion for regularized or not so regularized unauthorized colonies, I think you need to go for major redevelopment exercise. It is not only for unauthorized colonies, but many of our Indian cities like Ahmedabad, half of Ahmedabad is already life is over. Their buildings are waiting to fall down, and
Yes.
their buildings are non-engineered. We have to go for major redevelopment. Some of the major cities of India, we have not yet started, but the rest of the world has already done it, and we have to do for redevelopment. In that process, we can build it in a scientific way, what was not done earlier, with proper road network, amenities, and open spaces. For some building for which the characteristic is not known, you don't even know whether reinforcement is there. Well, there's no way that we can have an engineering solution to that problem. Even if you do something for a building, the area around doesn't have the supporting infrastructure. So you have to really take this as an opportunity to talk about redevelopment of certain areas which are actually quite dangerous. Same thing should be done for some of the areas which are slums, but not in terms of giving the land to the builder and they'll do a high-rise building and rest of them will be sold and poor guys will have one-room apartment somewhere else. I think we can build low-rise building for the slum dweller, give them a piece of land, let them build incremental housing, give them technical solutions. I think we have to look at involve the people and also talk about safety. I think these are all possibilities. But we have to think little beyond all the structural engineering, but we have to interface with urban development and economic development of the country. We have to link it. All the knowledge that GIDM, etc., whatever that you have, how does it come back to urban development and the directive from the government or the built into the policy of making a plan? One is that we can make a plan for any city like what Ravi has done for Mumbai. I guess the future plan of the city of Mumbai, when the Mumbai will become double, can we not have the problem that we already had? So some of them can be avoided. Others we already have. But the city will become twice in 15 years or maybe 20 years. What about the other thing that you're adding? So at least we can avoid the problem that we have today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. There are a lot of questions which we need to discuss, but let's organize some exclusive webinar on urban challenges in
Sure.
the disaster risk mitigation, and we'll request you again for the same. So now, turn is for Kamal Kishore, sir. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Okay, so lot of appreciation from the participants about your 5 point thing, and there are two queries which on behalf of participants I am going to raise. One is those are basically the governance related issues, and one is related to a resilient infrastructure.
Amir, I cannot hear you.
Sorry, but is it with you as well, Professor Ravisina? Can you hear me?
No, we can.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you clearly.
Okay. So, Kamal sir, are you able to hear me?
Yes, you are not very clear, but I can hear you. Tell me.
Oh, sorry for that. The thing is, first is related to somehow techno-legal aspects of buildings and all those things. One of the participants asked that the builders are promising anything. Like in Delhi, they promise Zone 5 for requirements fulfilled and all those things. And building performance, what we saw in past earthquakes, including Ahmedabad. So buildings are not performing even those basic requirements as per the building codes. So what is the solution to tame these builders community? This is number one. And the efforts made by Government of India and ourselves and the NDMA and behalf of Government of India for resilient infrastructure. So, what are the efforts we have already made in this direction of making our infrastructure resilient? So, we would like to answer these queries in brief, please. Thank you.
So, in response to the first question, that builders are offering all sorts of things, sometimes claiming that the building they have designed is to the standards of earthquake resilience that is required in Zone 5, not just in Zone 4. I think there are two ways to look at it. One way to look at it is that, obviously they are not revealing the full information about, if they are doing it, what does it mean? But the other point is that the fact that builders um, are projecting earthquake resilience of their buildings as a selling point is actually a good thing. Even if it is fudging, at least 20 years ago, it was not a selling point. So now it is a selling point. Now, what we need to do is we need to work with the public and educate the public as to what earthquake resilience actually would mean. In this regard, NDMA has been working on a homeowner's guide, which will address some of these things so that you can ask the builder more informed questions about, what does it mean when they say that what they're offering is resilient. Your second point, as you know, that all our infrastructure is resilient. International initiative, which we manage now with 18 countries and 3 international organizations as part of it. So we've started some work in Odisha, but that's focused on cyclone right now. Structure to to cyclones, particularly power infrastructure. We have a project starting on making sure that our airports are resilient. So this is an area which is a priority for the government, and we are taking steps to advance this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for celebrating all these things. So with this, I take this opportunity to conclude our technical part of the webinar, because definitely we are running out of time. So I'm not going to comment a lot, but I request ED, NIDM, to summarize the proceedings and give the closing remarks of this webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Amir Ali Khan. It is very difficult to summarize the proceedings because so much has been said and everyone has got a varied presentation, which in itself is a one-day webinar by itself. So I will not even attempt to summarize, but I will like to thank each and every panelist who gave such pertinent points and has given us a lot of things to ponder on. And we, as what Dr. Amir Ali Khan already spoke about, holding for on a particular issue, I think all the speakers, when they gave their presentations, had a totally different type of presentations, which itself we will, I think, hold webinars on. And the 5 points given by Kamal Kishorji were very, very pertinent. And they are the ones which we should always be looking at. And maybe those 5 points by itself will give us fresh topics for the next few webinars that we need to conduct, especially on earthquake risk mitigation. So with this, I thank everyone and Kamal Kishorji also for staying with us, even though we have overshot the time. But since it is a very important matter, that's why I think everyone stayed on. And we had a number of participants, and the comments are also very encouraging. So I thank all the participants for, first of all, patiently listening to this. And I hope they will disseminate whatever they have learned today to wherever their reach is, so that the issue that the people demand, which Kamal Kishorji spoke about, demand by the people, that factor is accentuated, and we are able to capitalize on that issue. Thank you so much, and over to you, Dr. Amir Khan.
Thank you so much, sir, for kind words and everything. So I also take this opportunity to extend my thank you to Executive Director NIDM for providing this opportunity to me for organizing this webinar on a very important topic, and to observe this 300th anniversary of Delhi earthquake, which is quite famous. And since we start preparing, a lot of people start talking about that earthquake, and a lot of activities has been generated at Delhi level. So let's continue our this momentum of observing this earthquake 300th anniversary of this earthquake, and continue organizing few of the webinars in this series. So we will continue on this issue. So this is one thing. So thank you so much, sir, for allowing us to organize this webinar, and encouraging us to take up webinars like this. So any webinar is not successful without speakers. So I take this opportunity to thank all the speakers for wonderful presentations, deliberations, and guiding us in making this webinar a success. Dr. Saurabh Shrivankar definitely did a good research on about that earthquake of 1720. So thank you so much, Saurabh Saab, for wonderful and nice presentation. Ravi Sinha Saab gave a presentation on earthquake risk in urban areas, and he presented that Mumbai case study. So, sir, thank you so much for making us aware about the disaster management plan, master plan for Mumbai. So, you are a guiding force for NIDM, so we will continue interacting with you as well. Professor Utpal Sharma Saab is a stalwart in his area of expertise, and sir, definitely, as I told earlier, and he was already consenting to that, we may definitely going to organize few more webinars on those urban challenges in disaster risk mitigation. And thank you so much, sir, for everything. Amit Sharma Saab, your area is the critical and backbone for urban planning and making. So your services will definitely be required in future as well. So thank you so much for spending time and guiding us in this. Uh, so Amal Kishore Saab is always a guiding force for NIDM and all the faculty members at the institute. So we are grateful to him for sparing that much of time and giving those leadways 5 points for future earthquake risk mitigation in urban context. So thank you so much, sir, for everything. You are definitely a guiding force for all of us at the institute level. So thank you so much. In addition to the speakers, we have NIDM team working behind the screen. So Yogita and Balaji, especially Balaji, is working for quite some time. So thank you to the entire team of NIDM for facilitating this webinar. And last but not least, once again, I thank the NIDM for permitting, allowing us to hold this webinar. Thank you to all. And with this, we come to the end of this webinar, and let's close this. Once again, thank you to all EBNIDM, Kamal Kishore Saab, all the speakers and the participants and my team at NIDM. Thank you so much for participating and guiding us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Namaste.
Thank you, sir. Sir, shall I end the meeting, sir?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.